Dear colleagues, friends, we can start our last but not least panel. And during this day and yesterday, we have talked a lot about very different things about the mass surveillance, law enforcement actions, investigation, new technologies, needs of the security, and upon all of this, personal data protection. And from all these talks, what we can see that we have different needs as a society. We have security need, we have innovation need, we have also need for the human rights. And sometimes this needs goes to the very opposite directions. So how we have to do it with them? We have to balance all these needs together with privacy, with the security, with the innovation. And I would say in the middle of this all balancing thing, it's one person, especially in the law enforcement institutions, is data protection officer, DPO. I always call them person orchestra, because they need to, play a little bit violin, drums, maybe some trombone or piano. It depends. They are, it's DPO and DPA, Data Protection Authority and Data Protection Officer. DPO, DPA sounds very, close together. And for me, this is DPO, it's a little prolongation, not like little small, but still prolongation of the Data Protection Authority, because he ensures that institution he works, or controller he works for, is compliant with the data protection regulation, or it's general data protection regulation, or it's law enforcement directive, or this is European Union regulation on data protection. So he is prolongation. He cannot find the controller, of course, but he has to ensure that risks are covered, compliance is achieved. Sounds like a very easy task. But is it real? Is it really this easy task on the practice? And on today's panel, we will try to find this, answer this a little bit philosophical question on what is the role of the DPO? Is it so easy role? And to start the presentations and to answer maybe and comes close to this answer, in our panel we have 3 persons who are constantly in this balance and battlefield each day. Data protection officers of law enforcement authorities. They know it by heart because they do it in practice every day. And today they will share their views, what they are doing, how they see their roles, what are the challenges, and how we can maybe find the answers on the questions and beat these challenges. As the first presenter, I would like to ask Michael Armstrong, who is representing the police, who's data protection officer of Police of the Ireland. So please, Michael, the floor is yours.
Afternoon. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for the introduction. I like the analogy of the conductor of the orchestra. I'm going to use possibly the point of exhaustion, a different analogy, which is that of a goalkeeper. But I understand it's the last panel of the day. It's been a great couple of days. People might be a bit tired. So probably the last thing you need is audience participation, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to demonstrate a point. So could I ask everyone, this is not a presidential protocol, but could everyone please stand? Okay, we're going to do an informal survey. So please remain standing if you work for a law enforcement agency. If not, sit down. Okay, great. Please remain standing if you work in the data protection function. Happy days. Lots of good representation. Please stay standing if your team is 5 people or less. Nice. So stay standing if you have 5 people or less in your team. Stay standing if it's just you. This is what my presentation is about today. Round of applause for these people. Because my analogy in terms of the situation, you can sit down, thanks. My analogy for that situation is effectively you are playing in terms of compliance, trying to keep the organization on side, trying to do the good work of data protection, which is about keeping data safe. It's about keeping people safe in the policing context. It's all about keeping freedoms as well. So safe and free, keeping those together. That's the role of data protection. My analogy is if you're doing this job on your own, you're effectively playing as a goalkeeper against a full squad. And that is not a sustainable option. So why would you do it? Well, I think in terms of, I can get to the next slide, the challenges of the job, first off, I want to demonstrate why it can't be seen as a one-person role. So this is a normal Monday. You're sitting working on a DPIA for a new system. You get a phone call with a query. It's about a new data sharing arrangement that the organization wants to get into. You're not sure whether you have enough of a legal basis to share the data. They want a bit of advice. You need to write an agreement. Turns out there's also a processor involved as well in the mix. So it's yourself, another controller, and a processor. So you're thinking this through. DPIA is sitting on your screen, still half red. It intersects with new legislation that's untested. And so you're looking maybe for a bit more in terms of legal advice, maybe having to go external. In the meantime, and hopefully it's a member of your team that's helping with this work, someone comes in with a question about an access request. It's been referred as a complaint to your supervisory authority. DPIA is still sitting on the screen. They've decided to launch an audit. They're not happy with the amount of time that you're taking to answer your access requests. This is a resource challenge. After the news of the audit, you need to sit down with your team. You maybe need to lead them through the process so they don't take it personally, they don't take it as a criticism. You should be leading as a team, as a DPO. It's not a one-person job. Then, maybe you remember you've got a training session. Now, this is training for the rest of the organization. You know, I'm sure it's the same across all of the law enforcement agencies. You have a situation whereby, you know, there's a constant throughput of personnel, retirements and new staff. Everyone needs up-to-date training on data protection. And you might want to get to the odd conference every now and a while to upskill yourself. And then you've got to do maybe corporate risk reporting as part of that. Now, that's quite a lot to get on with. And you're still halfway through that DPIA when you get a breach. That adds to the problem with your complaints. Maybe there's a legal challenge involved with the breach. You're sucked up with that. And then maybe, as well as the complaint investigation and the audit, your supervisory authority launches an inquiry. And then you think, I was halfway through that DPIA. So this is not a one-person job. This is a job about leading a team of people through that compliance function. My analogy would be it's a goalkeeper in a team. So let's look at what goalkeepers say about their role. There's a pressure involved. Being a DPO, being a goalkeeper, it's not for everybody. So the pressure is one of the things that might attract you to the position. I think it's important work. I'm sure all of you do. It's really important in terms of, like I say, keeping a free and a safe society and being able to defend the work of law enforcement agencies that they're in compliance with legislation. Equally, if something goes wrong, your phone is going to be red hot in terms of a breach incident or another issue. So you've got to be ready for that. You've also got to maybe have a bit of confidence in yourself, not up to the level of being an egomaniac, but you've got to have a bit of confidence because you might be the person who has to say no to some very senior people in your organization. You know, Buffon, a great keeper, summed this up. You need to be a little masochistic maybe, a masochist and an egocentric as well, because you're not going to be scoring that many goals as a goalkeeper or as a DPO. Oliver Kahn was maybe a little bit more abrupt with it. You need an element of an insanity. But it's a really valuable, I think, emerging profession. Goalkeepers, DPOs, you want to be called upon. You want to be of help. That's both internal and external to the organization. You want to keep people right. But you can't do it alone. And this is what this last quote is getting at in terms of you need a team. So you need your strikers, you need your defenders, you need your midfield, and you need to be a pretty decent goalkeeper, hopefully, is the intent as a DPO. So how we've approached it in An Garda Síochána, it's the Irish National Police and Security Service, is our data protection functions are integrated with a wider structure of what we call information-led policing. Now, what that means is, in other organizations, the data protection function, it's maybe off to the side or connected with legal. What we have is a dedicated function within the data and technology branch. We centrally manage access requests, we centrally manage breach notifications, we work on DPIAs, data sharing agreements, audit work as well, all under the DPO function reporting to the Chief Information Officer. That, to take the analogy, if I'm in the goalkeeper position, that is my centre backs, that is my defenders. These are the people who are helping me with access requests, with complaints, with breaches, all of this work that you have to manage as a data protection function. Moving into the midfield, we're working with analysts, we're working with our ICT functions, we're working with our data quality people, day and daily, in terms of addressing issues. And what this gives us is intelligence for where the organization is going, in terms of new processing activities, certainly in terms of, we've recently ruled out body-worn cameras as a new initiative here. And having that link in with the ICT functions is crucial because they're used to risk management, they're used to project management, they're used to compliance. You might actually get more help from ICT with the DPIA drafting than maybe the operational colleagues who see it all as a big hassle. But equally, as part of this structure, we do support our operational colleagues. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about investigations because I know Boris is going to speak specifically to that. But I think for operational colleagues, for people doing investigations, congratulations to the strikers in the team, the stars of the show. We would help with offences, investigations into offences under data protection legislation. That includes where there's been misuse internally of policing data. So through that, we hope we show our value to the organisation. Equally, it helps us to be connected in with what's going on across the place. We're not shunted off to the side. And it's worked pretty well. One example I'll talk about is, I'm just conscious of time, with the rollout of body-worn cameras, we got advice from our supervisory authority that said that while the new legislation that we have for that gives us a basis for the cameras, it wouldn't allow for special category processing. So effectively, it wouldn't allow for, well, actually not special category, but more advanced processing, the like of facial recognition and the rest, so biometric processing. Because I was in that structure, I was able to have that conversation with the ICT project team at an early stage, with the Chief Information Officer at an early stage, and that then escalated the conversations with our department about new separate legislation to allow for those advanced processing. That's much better than rushing into a processing activity and then maybe finding out from a nice letter from your supervisory authority in a couple of years that you don't really have a sufficient legal basis for any of this. Meanwhile, you've been doing investigations and prosecutions and the rest. So I think that structure has been crucial for us to get ahead of the game a wee bit. And hopefully over time, with good work, our relationship with the supervisory authority can go from this, Kalina, not looking too happy, to that, happy Kalina. Still Kalina, but a little bit happier. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Michael, but I would say that this picture of Data Protection Authority still scares me, even the second one. But for the next speaker, as well as I said, the next warrior on the field will be representative of the Slovenian police office and its Data Protection Officer of Police, Boris Obolnar. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Boris Obolnar, and I come from the Slovenian police. I'm the data protection officer last 6 years, and it was really challenging work for me. Today presentation, I will focus on the key aspects of the data protection in law enforcement, especially highlighting the role of data protection officer, the importance of the compliance, the trainings, the data minimization, and the internal investigation within the police. As data protection is crucial element of the modern policing, understanding the framework and ensuring the accountability and the essential for the maintain public trust. Like my president said yesterday, the trust is most important between law enforcement and the data subject and the public. So I'll just give the next slide. So what is the role of DPO and law enforcement agencies? So first, compliance advices, trainings. Then you have internal investigations. We have to also report if there is some data that's breaches or something like that to the DPA and other inspections. So this is the most important business for me. Auditing and monitoring. So what is the role of the data protection officer? He has to be the part of the team, part of the police team, but on the one side, he should be integrated as the law enforcement authority, enabled within the organization to provide real-time advices and support, particularly in complex cases involving sensitive data. We also have to be observers and advisors how to organize data processing activities and compliant with it while ensuring operational efficacy. What is the problem? The balance between requirements of the data protection laws and the unique operation needs of law enforcement. On which side you are or where you are positioned at that time. That is quite challenging. Also, the compliance audit. The DPO must also maintain in the independent state to ensure that data processing aligns with the legal requirements, particularly when reviewing policies and procedures of the specific cases. Their role is an auditor of ongoing compliance without any external body. So, point of contact with the DPA and the point of contact with the data subject and the public. So this is one of the 4 major roles of the DPO that I see. So the next slide talks about compliance with the data protection regulations is not one-time job. It requires continuously effort, including trainings for all the staff, because officers are provided with ongoing training sessions to keep them in date with the relevant data protection rules, also the rules of the police powers. These sessions help ensure that everybody of the office understands that interactions of data processing and their responsibility regarding the personal data protection. A DPO challenge: define clear processing purposes, legal basis, case-by-case evaluations. The boundary between criminal procedural and data protection regulation is delicate. Criminal procedures law allows law enforcement to process data for all the purposes of enforcing law and protecting public safety, often in the way that bypass typical consent requirements. On the other hand, data protection law demands strict safeguards on how personal data is collected, stored, and shared. So, compliance advices, trainings, this is more important. During these training sessions, officers are introduced to real-world scenarios. We try to get the cases and go to the cases, giving the officers the tools they need to make informed decisions, and decisions prevent potential breaches of the personal data, minimizing for the safeguarding individual privacy. We have this. Update internal policies, procedures regarding data processing. We have regular assessment to ensure compliance with the data protection standards. We have regular trainings, sessions on the data protection regulations. We also have, next one, data minimization for safeguarding individual privacy, assessing data based on the lawful foundation for sure, and actions must be documented in the processing logs. That's became about the internal investigation. So internal investigation within the law enforcement play a crucial role in ensuring this, all that is here. Like my colleague Michael showed us about the football, internal investigations also are like war room for me. So we check all the logs, the audits and everything, so we can do the reconstruction of some actions that were done in the police forces. So internal investigation within the law enforcement done by the internal services, but with the connection with the data protection officer, because also the internals can't use all the data for the different purposes. So when we're doing the logs, we need to do the logs of everything. So geo, the transport and everything. So in addition, taken during this investigation must be carefully documented in the processing log, which provide traceability and allow for audits. These logs are vital tools for the distribution of the last feature. Okay, this is the end. Questions if you want the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. We will keep questions for the end of our panel. And now I will ask to take the floor the person who holds today two hats, I would say. One, data protection officer of the Europol, and the second one, the organizer of this fascinating and very good and fabulous conference. So please, Daniel Drewer, with his answers on the question, what would be the role of the data protection officer?
Thank you very much, Katharina. A friend of mine from the academic world said to me the following: may I give you an advice, Daniel? Never, absolutely never talk on a conference that you organize yourself. And I didn't follow that advice, and there's just one simple reason for this. Those that know you, that know me a bit better, the role of the data protection officer is very close to my heart. And when Katharina came to me and said, well, couldn't we dedicate actually a panel to the role of data protection officer at the Eden conference, I said, absolutely. And then she said to me, yeah, I was thinking of Michael and Boris, and I said, I will be there as well. With this too, I also want to speak. I don't have slides for you. I really just wanted to share some thoughts on the developments, how I see it regarding data protection officer. Just as a reminder, this Eden conference actually takes place on the basis of a group of data protection officers of national police that started to meet some years ago, and out of this we understood actually that is a role that deserves also a bigger conference. That the Eden network actually is there to provide, on the one side, the basis for the data protection officers of the law enforcement authorities to meet regularly, and on the other side also to open their world actually to the wider world. And I think both Michael and Boris already explained to us how interconnected actually the work of data protection officers, and then in particular the work of data protection officers, is in the law enforcement environment. And I think both of them also showed us or gave us a view into their particular work as data protection officers in the particular area of law enforcement. And we saw that there are differences. I mean, we apply, of course, the law enforcement directive, and we apply the European regulation, and there's written we have a data protection officer for this and this and this. But fact is, and that is my opinion, we are still there shaping that role. We are still really at the beginning. I would even say a conference for internal auditors would have not PowerPoint presentations what internal auditors are supposed to do. Because internal auditors are much longer on the market than data protection officers are. And then in particular in the field of law enforcement data protection officers, this is a function that very fast can get into the spotlight of public interest. So having said that, yesterday the law enforcement DPOs, and many are still here in the room, met in the Peel room here at Europol. As we all know, Robert Peel, founder of the Metropolitan Police. 1829, he said, the power of the police to fulfill their functions and duties is dependent on public approval of their existence, actions and behavior, and on their ability to secure and maintain public respect. So maybe that was the first time to develop an idea how law enforcement should act versus the wider public, in the eye of the wider public. 2024, the Europol director, and that is interesting, the Europol director at the first management board in 2024 said, Europol is built on trust and data protection compliance. So, of course, I give in, Europol is a particular law enforcement organization. We process as the national law enforcement authorities do also, but we are also an information hub. But she made this emphasis. She said Europol is built on trust and data protection compliance. And I believe that this, and we heard in this conference a lot of time, this notion of trust, but I think this also gives another emphasis on the role of data protection officers, isn't it? Because the data protection officers, we all know this, they have a crucial role to uphold the compliance regarding data protection in an organization. And this statement maybe will take its way. And it will more when you talk about organizations that handle and process a high amount of personal data. It will be more said like that. We need trust and data protection compliance. And I put it actually directly in one sentence. Maybe you remember in the past Eden conference, I started to develop on, and that's why we have still here 4 canaries. So for all your questions, there are still enough canaries. I started to develop on this, the role of the data protection officer, and then compared to a canary that warns and says, well, to the controller, don't go too deep into this data mine because then you get problems. Last year, I talked about, well, maybe data protection officers should shift a bit. So go away from the pure warning canary and go into the area of a butcher bird, more forceful towards the controller, more taking that what is written in the task description of the DPO and taking the controller aside and say, well, this has to be changed and this has to be changed in order to shape forcefully the data protection compliance and also the frameworks that are around this. Today, I just wanted to, and there is the slide, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask one question. Should data protection officers, and we have a lot of practitioners here in the room, should they actually also be the devil's advocate? And I'm really talking about my own experience as data protection officer together with my team. Often we have discussions on the very difficult matter of data protection, fundamental rights, police effectiveness, operational success. And we have this discussion internally, and there's always one of my colleagues that says, I'm playing now the devil's advocate. And what follows then, and you will know this, is actually a worst case scenario. If we do this, then this might happen, and think about the press, think about the EDPS, think about whether member states next time again will entrust us with this information. To keep this long story short regarding the devil's advocate, the devil's advocate concept is actually that you have one person in the room that on the same information that everyone at the table has available applies a critical thinking and says, well, you can also see it in a different way. Actually, the origins are centuries old and come from the Roman Catholic Church of the devil's advocate. Because the devil's advocate was actually the office saying in the Vatican, when all the proposals were there for sainthood, on the basis of the facts that we have, this person maybe should not be a saint. It doesn't exist anymore, by the way, but it is history. But it started like that. So what I want to say is, well, there is a lot of value in this devil's advocacy principle, yeah? That somebody plays this role and it brings forward critical thinking. And at the end also brings the controller, if the advice is given in this way, to maybe a better decision. There are research on this, that this concept works. The question is just, should the data protection officer act as a devil's advocate in his organization? And there, in my opinion, that we should not do. Yeah, we should not put ourselves in that role, because we have some national institutions and agencies where there are roles developed as devil's advocate, but there are different functions. So as Michael rightfully said, and also Boris rightfully said, the data protection officer cannot act in isolation. We need the cooperation with the internal auditors. We need the cooperation with the IT security officers. We need the cooperation with our legal affairs units. It's impossible to do data protection officer in isolation. Ideally in an organization, and I wonder if any one of you has it here, there should be also an office of the devil's advocate that applies this critical thinking. If I asked, I'm coming almost to the end of my intervention, I asked ChatGPT for whether DPOs should act as devil's advocates. And the answer is, devil's advocates see aligns with the DPO's duty to act independently and impartially in the interest of data subjects, not just the organization. Therefore, a DPO should, at times, adopt a devil's advocate's stance to fulfill their obligation effectively. We cannot agree with that. Yeah, because it's very short-sighted, this. Yeah, because if we do, so first of all, data subjects are not the devil. I mean, that's clear. But if we would agree with this, we would cut off a lot of possibilities that the DPOs actually have, and we would put ourselves also in the wrong corner of the organization. Because this, if an organization is mature enough to have this devil's advocates within the organization, there should be a separate function. We are there to serve the organization, also in the interest of data subjects. And therefore, I think there's no role for this. I wanted to share this with you as one of the thoughts that I had when I looked at how DPOs in a very, very difficult assurance role, because I think we can be all agreeing with this. The data protection function as such is one of the most difficult assurance roles, in particular the one in law enforcement, because it is often our questions of life and death that we have often in the Europol data protection function, that we sit together and we say, well, this is now urgent and we need these discussions. And then we apply the devil's advocacy within the data protection experts that we are, but we are not playing the devil's advocate and go to the controller and make the worst case scenario. That should be not our role. My opinion, but I'm very much looking forward to dive deeper into the discussion on the role of data protection officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And I think that there would be some questions from the audience, but I will use my priority situation as a moderator to ask you a question for all of you. According to the regulation, data protection officer have to be independent, and as well, he or she has a duty to, and possibility, I would say, to inform and to reach the head of the institution, to report him on some risks, on compliance or non-compliance. And his work, report, or opinion cannot be changed by all other staff who is coming. But we are talking about the law enforcement. Law enforcement institutions are very hierarchical institutions, and as well institutions with a culture of subordination. So what you see and what the powers, what you will think the powers of the DPO have to be given to the DPO, so DPO can perform his or hers duties effectively and according to this regulation, maybe from your experience or something else. What you will want to have if somebody would allow you to choose some powers? You're free to start.
This working? Yep. I don't think we need more powers, if I'm honest. I think we need more resources, certainly for colleagues in the room. Or one-man banding or one-woman banding it. I think that's a ridiculous situation, given the responsibilities of a DPO. I have to say, just as I said in my presentation, I'm very lucky in terms of our setup in Garda Síochána. I have good support. There's no pressure if there's an issue there for me to change my viewpoint or advice on a particular issue, well supported through the Chief Information Officer to the top of the organization. But what I would say is I agree with Daniel that I don't think we can be the devil's advocate, the kind of Eeyore figure of constantly talking about the worst case scenario and the risks. I think actually the most effective way to do the job is to work with business areas, try to point out the handrails and guardrails, the supporting elements of the legislation, what they need to think about through the DPIA process and the rest to keep themselves right, and to be part of the team. And what that does mean is you build up credibility within the organization. So when there is an issue and you need to be able to say, we have a problem here, you're listened to.
Somebody, both of you, Samad?
I agree with Michael about the resources, but I will just say shortly. Independence means that we need to have also enough budget and human resources. So this is, if I don't have the money, for example, to go to educate, to do the trainings, to do the trainings for me, there I'm not independent. Also, if I don't have a lot of people in my team, I'm also not independent because I'm all the time late. I'm not compliant. So this is more important than powers, because I think that we have enough power to do our job, but we need resources and independence.
Thanks for the question. That is, of course, quite a sensitive issue because I think it is sensitive in general for DPOs and is particularly sensitive in law enforcement structures, because law enforcement structures have a hierarchy. And I can remember when there was the first discussion at Europol around 2008-9, and I was at that time still the Europol director was Max-Peter Ratzel. And he said, well, if we establish a new function like data protection officer, and there was not yet the legal obligation to have it, this person has to have a sufficient level in the hierarchy. And that was really speaking out of the heart of the police, saying basically you have to put the data protection officer in the police on a hierarchy level where this person has no hesitation to go to the top of the organization, to open that door and say, sorry, madam or sir, we have to speak. So, but that was 2009, 2010. Now, the question that you ask now, I think it is, and it shows also with what sensitivity data protection officer in this hierarchical organization actually have to move. Because you cannot go every second day to the top of the organization and say something is not going in the right way. You have to put your priorities in place, and you have also to see the assurance provider on data protection is not just the data protection officer. When it is about an IT security issue, you have information security officers. If it is about a matter that is already on the table of the data protection supervision, there's no need as a data protection officer to go to the top of the organization. But if you see that nobody else goes, then you have to go. And then it should be ideally a normality. And a mature controller will say, well, I thank the data protection officer for this, because in this way, further risk of the agency or organization could be prevented. But it is very difficult question, first of all, and it's also not so easy to answer, because you really have to navigate and understand the players that are to the left and right to you.
Just to add, from perspective of the Data Protection Authority, I would say we have the same, for me as a head of the Data Protection Authority, I have the same vision. The data protection officer have to be quite powerful to say to the head of the organization or other divisions of the organization that something is not correct. And they have to respect them and not thinking, oh, this data protection, we do not think that this is so necessary. What we see as a Data Protection Authority as well in practice, that sometimes not only in law enforcement authorities, but controllers as such think that, okay, we nominated the person as DPO, but it's not our duty to listen to them. And this is the biggest mistake. And then this is the first, I would say, uncompliance with the data protection regulation. But now I would give the floor to the audience. I already see two hands. The first one, the fourth row, and then the lady. I have seen. Okay, ladies first. Sorry, the gender discrimination. Yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering, how do you organize your checks and balances? Because within the trias politica, the lawmaker writes the law but doesn't check the law if people are compliant to it. If I see the presentations, it seems to me that the DPOs are also forming policies, privacy policies. Within the Netherlands, we have a strict division between the DPO and the CPO. The CPO is part of the CIO office. That's the second line of defense. They make frameworks for the whole organization. The DPO is in the fourth line of defense and is checking the whole organization if they are compliant. So I was wondering, do other countries also have the same system, or is the Netherlands peculiar about this?
Maybe Michael, from the perspective of Ireland.
For ourselves, it is slightly different. We're not as strict, let's say, in terms of the division of responsibilities. So we will, as part of our office, we will be taking on more of a role actually on the records management side. But there's benefits to that as well, because it means that as policy is developed, and it would be separate from the core data protection functions, a separate team. But as that policy work is done across the organization to improve our records management policies, everyone's in the same general business area, in the same general team, so you can get ahead of compliance issues while you're developing policy, while still having kind of a separation between the compliance and the policy development functions.
Maybe I can try to answer that, because it's a good question, this one. In the task description, in the legal text for the data protection officers, is written, you should cooperate with those in your entity that are responsible for training and for audit. Ask the data protection officer, and Fatou, yourself a data protection officer, how many of the data protection officers are actually doing the training, and how many do actually compliance actions. So I think in most of the cases, to have many functions that look also at data protection and data protection compliance is on the one side a luxury, which I don't think a lot of public administration can allow them anymore. But there's also risk, and that is that the role of the data protection officer, the more functions like CISO or like artificial intelligence officer, in all these functions that they are then distributed in an organization, there's the risk that the tasks of the data protection officer get blurred. That's why I always say there's just one opinion of the data protection officer in an organization, and that only comes from the data protection officer. There might be a lot of different views on data protection within an agency, outside of an agency, by the regulator, but there's just one view of the assurance provider on data protection, which is the data protection officer, and this is the only opinion that you get from this person.
The next question, the second one, but still. Yeah.
Now it's working. I've got the bird. This is what I said in the first line. I work at Europol, and I would like to just share my thoughts, and then there's a question, so that you understand why the question. I cannot imagine running a project without talking to DPO. I just don't, because it's somehow in our veins that we go and talk. How many times I communicate with Jan or Daniel or where is she? Borislava, Daisy, yeah. So we had a lot of discussions on weird things, and sometimes we don't even collect the data. We have a project without collection of data, but we ask for opinion. So that's the interesting part. Now the question is, I know where the DPO at Europol stands in the hierarchy, or if I call it the hierarchy, maybe the structure of the organization. What about in yours? I understand for Slovenian police where he's, I would say, located, situated, structured. But what about the others? This is also a matter of independency somehow. If you are structured under, I don't know, IT department or under the cabinet of the general director of the police, are you having sui generis office, or how are you guys organized? Thank you.
I just short comment. You said that you do not imagine how you cannot go and talk with a data protection officer. I'm working in a data supervisor authority. I can imagine that institution even does not notify data protection officer that they have investigation from the data protection authority. It's normal practice for many controllers. So it's as well the culture. And as Daniel mentioned previously in Europol, I presume you have a more like developed culture of the data protection, but for the many member states and many controllers, it's unfortunately still not like this. But
I will just add for this question, because I know Tony is from Slovenia also, so he knows the hierarchy of the Slovenian police. I will start like this. In 2018, there was how to say, action that we need the data protection officer in the Slovenian police. So they said, okay, where we will find that person? And they said, okay, the data is connected with the ICT office. So let's try to find them. Because when they say, okay, the person will be from the ITC office, but that person has to have some knowledge about the legal knowledge, the knowledge about the technique, and also the knowledge about the police forces and everything. So it was really hard when we started our mini office with a DPO. Now we have 3 people inside to help me. But most important is how you get this relationship to the higher management. So it doesn't matter where you are situated. Is it I don't know, the ITC office like me, or I don't know, the cabinet of the general director? It doesn't matter. The matter is how you get this relationship with the higher management, the trust in between, that you can work your work and you can do what the role of DPO is. So for me, it doesn't matter where this position is. But I know what you mean. It should be higher somewhere in the independent office, like I said.
I would agree. And look, one thing I'd make clear is we're not an add-on to the ICT function. It's a data and technology branch. So on the data side, that's our information services center. It's recording incidents. That's our analysis function. That's ourselves in data protection. So just as you have the ICT folks working on all the tech stuff in terms of the actual systems, you also have who are the key users of those systems. So it makes sense for us to be part of that conversation week on week in terms of what is going on across the board, for a DPO to have that horizon scan. One thing, just a separate comment, but I do worry about, it's not so much where are you in the organization, it's resource and capacity. The comment from the president yesterday, Europe regulates, and we know with the AI Act, who knows, after yesterday's presentation, we may have a Quantum Act. I would say that the challenge for DPOs is to keep on board of their existing responsibilities under data protection legislation. I have a worry that very quickly we'll be expected to be AI protection officers and also maybe quantum protection officers when we are fighting to get the resources we need to do our current job. Thank you.
I think, Michael, the AI protection officers will be data protection officers, just with additional function and without the resources like normal it is. We have one more question because I saw the other hands, but we are running a little bit out of time, but we will take this last question. I think you have to just start to speak.
Again, it's not a question, just a remark. Mr. Drewer, you were saying something really interesting around that we're still shaping our role as a DPO. I've been a DPO for more than 7 years now. And I completely agree with that. But also society forces us to reshape our role, because I remember when I started out as DPO, I had to really start from scratch. I didn't have any help at all. Luckily, I'm a social person, so I asked a lot of people for help. But like in the beginning, it was, we had to make a register for processing activities, and now we see more access requests. because data subjects are more aware that they can exercise their rights. So I think that's also a really interesting evolution in our job, actually, because I think I still have more than 30 years to work before I retire, if I ever retire. So I think there's a lot of, still a lot of challenges there. That's a remark. I also have a suggestion. It's my first time here at the Eden Conference. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed myself here. I learned a lot. So maybe the suggestion is not necessary, but I will take the liberty of doing it anyway. I think there's still a lot to be said about the challenges of the DPO. I did a research paper and with questionnaires around the well-being of DPOs, because there's a lot DPOs that are getting burned out because they are working alone, because they don't get supportive management, because they're working in a cultural that's around fear, and that they are afraid to be a sort of devil's advocate and to dare to ask the questions that need to be asked. So yeah, I hope that next year I can come back and that there will be another panel on this, because I think there's still a lot to be said on this subject. But for now, thank you very much for this interesting panel and conference.
Thank you very much for your comment. Daniel?
Thanks a lot for this comment and suggestion. I invite you to the next Eden conference and to organize, please, a panel on well-being in that profession. I think it's absolutely crucial. So thank you very much for this suggestion. Please, after this conference, approach me that we exchange contact details.
But to finish this session, and we have 3 data protection officers here on stage. We have quite many, I would say, data protection officers who works alone or who works in teams. And nevertheless, we have heard a lot of the challenges and the problems that you are dealing with in your daily life. But still, if somebody will say to you now, will you stay data protection officer with all this work, or we will invite you to go to the job with maybe same salary or better salary and do something completely different, who from you would stay in the data protection officer's position? Because it's interesting. Can you raise the hands who stay? Okay, there are few people, and I think we have to applaud for these few people who still will stay with the data protection and will protect the personal data within the law enforcement authorities.